What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. It's Ty in the sauna from Unbound Athletic, and today we're going to talk all about the board press. Board press is an interesting variation to our bench press work that has got me enthralled lately. I'm obsessed with board press to the point where I went out, got myself some custom made boards for my gym, and we've been using it pretty thoroughly for the last year and had some massive benefits. Pros and cons of board press, we'll cover that today. How I utilize it in training and the kind of protocols I use, and some alternate exercises if you don't have access to friends or boards. Let's start off. Board press. What is it and how can you utilize it in your training? Board press is basically a reduced range of motion bench press that allows you to overload. I treat it like a box squat almost, where we can build some power and explosive work from certain positions. It allows us to imitate our bench press setup, so it doesn't affect how we start or set our bench press, but it allows us to lift heavy loads, much heavier than what we can currently lift, or we can work on specific sticking points that allow us to break through plateaus where we're getting stuck at certain points of the movement. So it has lots of benefits. The benefits I'll generally like to list is, like I said, we can set up in our conventional bench press position, which is a fantastic one. Nothing's worse than doing a movement or a variation that doesn't allow you to imitate the movement you're trying to improve. Pin press is fantastic for, I guess, kind of like explosive strength. If we want to think about pin press like a dead stop deadlift, where you start from a complete stop, so you don't get to use stretch reflex of the pecs, the shoulders, and the triceps. It does make the movement a little bit harder, but the only downside is I generally find that pin press struggles to maintain our bench press setup because we have to start from that dead stop. It sometimes doesn't set up right over that nice part of our chest or that sternum that we like to press from, and it can get a little bit awkward, especially because we are starting from a dead stop, which is not how the bench press is performed. Even though in a pause bench press, we technically come to a complete stop, there's still tons of tension in the bottom, whereas the pin press doesn't have that option or ability to imitate that from that position, which is where I like the board press. Board press, you can maintain position, you can choose to pause or touch and go, and you can go well above your 1 rep max weight versus a pin press where you probably find that generally you can't, because that initial dead stop will then limit the ability to push past our 1 rep max. So that's one of the positives. Positive is that you're able to utilize it in our bench press setup and you can overload it very easy. Another positive is it works on sticking points and particular areas that we struggle at. I think that's fantastic. If you identify with a specific athlete that they struggle in a certain position, I personally have a super unique sticking point where it's literally like elbow lockout, where for me it's my upper back tends to give out. My triceps can't carry me anymore, so my upper back strength towards the top of the movement is quite weak. I get to practice that with high boards with lots of reps, which is a potential positive for me because it's a position that's pretty hard to train without the boards or without pins. So that's another positive of the board press. Now, how do I utilize it in training? We'll go through this before we touch on cons. Utilizing in training can vary. You can use it as dynamic explosive work, like a kind of a 50 to 60% box squat where we're looking at building some power. You can utilize the board as pause work. So like in that same dynamic sense, let's say my sticking point is 90 degrees on the elbow. I come down here, I pause, bang, explode. Come down, pause, bang, explode, so on and so forth. And that allows us to generate some more force output. And obviously the more force you can produce, the easier it is to get through those sticking points when we're under a little bit of fatigue. That is an awesome benefit of it. So those lighter percentages has some benefits. It's not really what I utilize it for, but it has that potential to be utilized as that variation if needed as some explosive bench work. It kind of fits on the lines of speed work or plyometric work. You can utilize it for that sense too. But what I mainly like to use it for is overload. We do this normally post our bench press work. So let's say I do a set of 3 sets of 3 at 90%. Then I might back off with a 100% board press AMRAP, a 90% board press AMRAP, depending on what we're working on and what the focus is. I love going over our 95 to 100% for board press, even upwards of 110%. The main reason is confidence. One of the things I find is when we go for a new PR on bench press, we unrack that weight and we're like, holy fuck, this is heavy. Like, this is a lot of weight. Am I going to be able to do this? Like, am I going to be able to control this? That allows with the board press to build that confidence, knowing that, hey, like I've boarded let's say my one room's 160. I boarded 170 for 2 on a 3-inch board, which is like that much. It's not really that big. My partner tells me it's that big, but anyway, the 3-inch board, normally it's like that big. So you're like, wow, that's not too far off my chest. Like if I can do 3 reps at 170, surely I have the capacity and the ability to do 1 rep at 170 if I'm close to that point and I've been doing other metrics and training to do that. So that's a great way to utilize it, that overload work. This is personally the final pro, I haven't even mentioned, is its camaraderie. It's the one exercise where, unlike squatting as a spotter or, deadlifting to an extent as that person that stands behind just in case the person passes out, you kind of feel like you're just, volunteering your time and you're like, this is shit. I'm not even doing it. I'm just standing on the side, like trying to make sure they don't fucking kill themselves. And you're like, this is a lot of weight and I'm going to die. Whereas a board, like you've got 3 people involved. Generally, if performed correctly, it can be done with 2, very dangerously, but it can be done with 2, but preferably 3 people. You have a spotter, the bencher, and the boarder. All have very vital roles, and it feels like a community. Like it feels like everyone's involved. As the boarder, you feel like you're doing something. As the spotter, you're helping out the bencher. And the bencher, you don't want to let your teammates down. You've got these 2 people who are taking their time to help you out so you can perform your set, which is incredible. And it just gives so much more value to the same movement. That's the pros. That's the way I would utilize it in training. The cons. It does have some drawbacks or some setbacks as a movement. The main one is the availability of people. Even though it's awesome to be the 2 or 3 people assisting the exercise, in the best of times, it's hard to find a good spotter as it is. Unless you're training with training partners or you've got a good tight-knit crew or you have a coach or a volunteer who's experienced, it's hard to find good people to come and perform the board with you. Also, board requires experience on its own. The boards aren't necessarily stable. You need to plant it down with 2 hands, actively pushing into the athlete's chest, making sure there's no rebound on the boards, which can throw the athlete off. So there's a lot of pressure from the boarder too. Finding the right spot to put the board on their chest will vary from athlete to athlete. So you've got to have some experience knowing the athlete first before then just chucking the board on their chest and hoping for the best. And then on top of that, like you've got to have the boards in your gym. They're not cheap to get shipped. I know Rogue is one of the only equipment websites that actually sell them publicly. I got mine from a guy it's local to me called the Hippie Chippy. I sent him the Rogue specifications and he custom made me 5 boards for like $200. Whereas if I bought them from Rogue, because I'm not American, it would have costed me like $1,000 because of the shipping. So that was fantastic, but the availability of them is a little bit low. So if you don't have friends or you don't have the boards, it already makes you off to a bad start. Let's say you do have friends and you do have the board. What other setbacks does it have? Obviously a decreased range of motion. You can't utilize this as main work. Like you need to utilize this as either overload or accessory work. It can't be as, unless it's like a specific positional day and you're really working just those sticking points and you have complementary volume and intensity days on the other side of it, fine, like that'll work really well. We use it, like I said, as an accessory. It's a secondary bench variation for us, kind of like close grip or incline. But I wouldn't utilize it as a main lift unless you're going to skinny boards, like 3 or 1.5 inch. In that case, the range is pretty decent. Like you'll get decent amounts out of it. That being said, like when I was boarding on the weekend and we had the 6-inch board, I still felt so much stimulus in my pecs, triceps, and shoulders. Even though like the range of motion was like that large, you still get something out of it. Like, but it's not going to be a hypertrophy exercise. You're not going to get necessarily the same strength adaptations as just doing a full range of motion bench, but it's good as an accessory. So that is a drawback. Range, friends, and the availability of the boards. And the final one is risk of injury. Of course, because we are lifting above and beyond what is possible for us physically at the time and place, you need to be warm and primed for it, which is also why I like putting it second, not first, not as the main work, as a secondary exercise to the bench, because after your main set, even though you are a little bit fatigued and it might take away from your ability to push out a few more reps in the board, at least you're warm. Nothing's worse than like doing unrack holds, let's say on a squat, and you pop a rib because it's so heavy and you probably haven't done enough warming up to that weight. The same goes for bench. We want to make sure we're not tearing pecs, shoulders, or triceps. We're not hurting ourselves unnecessarily. And if you know you're someone who is pretty fragile, you might want to stay away from an exercise like this. But there's only one way to condition yourself well, and that is with the board press. My final notes on it, the board press is like a bench press hold, but a version that you can actually perform reps with. You can overload the weight quite heavy, anywhere from 90 to 110%, and get some great benefits. It'll help break through plateaus and sticking points, and it's a valuable tool that I think you should consider in your bench press training. You got to keep in mind, you've got to have boards available at your gym. You got to have enough friends to be able to perform the board press correctly. And then finally, you got to make sure that you're warm enough to perform the movement. So positioning this second, doing AMRAPs or set amount of rep work from 90 to 110%, you'll see some breakthroughs in your bench press work. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, and you'll see me on the next one, probably with a shirt on and not in the sauna.